All right. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D the Deep Dive, the show where we dive into the mechanics of classes and subclasses to figure out how they were intended to play and how you can get the most out of them. So today we're going into the last of the subclasses that were released on in Unearthed Arcana this past month. This one is going to be a ranger archetype called the Fey Wanderer. So I'm gonna jump right into it to see if this video can actually be a little bit shorter, because the last two are still clocking in at the 30 minutes, which is longer than I wanted. But I think they were good. Definitely in the comments below, let me know if you're liking this kind of one archetype per of a video format, or do you prefer the ones where I have more stuff in one video? Just what are your thoughts? So, let's start with, again, the idea of in for fifth edition, each class should play very differently, and kind of the defining features that make that class unique should appear in the class within the first two levels. And the ranger itself is, again, supposed to be this kind of nature warrior. It had a lot of issues with the PHB version of it, because it kind of turned into this jack of all trades, master of none type thing, where it was a half caster, so it could cast some spells, some nature based spells, but a lot of times they weren't that useful. It could be a melee or a ranged attacker, but it didn't always work that way. And other classes could literally do everything that a ranger could do, just better. So the newer archetype sort, which is what the rangers subclasses are called, have really been making up for just kind of the lack of uniqueness to the ranger, and the Fey Wanderer, I think, achieves this pretty well. So again, it's a nature type warrior, and specifically, the ranger is supposed to be a very good kind of hunter, stalker type character of specific kinds of creatures. It will have a favored enemy, which has been a feature of the Rangers since it first appeared. With that in mind, let's look at the Fey Wanderer. And I think one of the cool things about the Fey Wanderer is right from the beginning, it gives you some role playing. The first option you get is a role playing option. This is absolutely no effect on combat. It is just a role playing thing. But what happens is the Fey Wanderer guards the border between the Feywild and the material plane, and because of that, they kind of have this like blessing or gift from the Feywild. They're almost like part Fey or Fey blessed. But because of that, it actually manifests physically. So the first thing you get is this list of six different gifts. That all they are the things like you faintly smell of cinnamon, lavender, nutmeg, or another comforting herb or spice. Or your shadow dances when no one is looking directly at it. Again, none of this is going to change how you play the game. It's just going to give your character a little bit of character, a little bit of a flavor. And I like that. I like the idea of the archetype is going to flavor your character and make him that much more unique. So you actually start the archetype with something that will physically distance you from another ranger. So I thought that was cool. The next thing, again, this is very common in everything other than the PHB Ranger archetypes, is you get extra spells. Again, I mentioned before, the spells the ranger has access to, other than Hunter's Mark, there's not a ton that are that useful, especially if you are a melee ranger, which is a very classic version of the ranger. Originally, rangers were these amazing dual wielding fighters. Drizzt is a great example. In 5th edition, everyone can dual wield, which I actually like because I hated how complicated it used to be. But nothing they had made them especially good at it, which they used to be. So they've been making up for that by each new archetype will actually get a bunch of spells that they add to their spell list. So the spells count as ranger spells. They don't count against the number of spells. You know, 3rd level you get Charm Person, which is a very faith thing. 5th level you get Misty Step. I love Misty Step, and for a melee ranger, Misty Step is super useful. It's basically it's a bonus action to teleport. But melee, you have to get in close, and sometimes running directly up to a dude is going to cause problems because you have to get past other ones, or maybe there's just no physical way to get there. Misty Step allows you to just teleport. I believe it's either the 30 or 60 feet as your bonus action, and then when you get there, you can still attack. So I like Misty Step as a spell, and it fits really well into the Fey Wanderer because it is something associated with the Feywild. 9th level you get Dispel Magic. 13th is Banishment. 17th is Mislead. Mislead is one of the coolest spells. It's kind of complicated, but basically, if I remember correctly, I'll actually look it up here to be on the safe side. But if I remember correctly, you basically, I'm literally right there. There we go. Yes, so basically, I have this new shelf now, and I love it because all of my D&D books are right there. It's great. So basically, what happens is you become invisible, and at the same time, an illusory clone of you wanders off the other direction. It's such an interesting, useful ability. Definitely fits with the whole Fey kind of trickster type thing. And can actually be used really, really well. You can not only use it in the middle of combat to kind of fool your foes, you can use it as a way to scout, but because while you have your clone out there, you can actually see and hear through your clone. It lasts up to an hour, but it will end early if you make an attack or anything like that. The clone itself can't make attacks or anything. So as far as combat use, it's really just designed to be a misdirection, which mislead that kind of fits. But beyond that, you're not going to get a lot of combat use out of it, other than saving your ass when you need it. But using it as a way to scout ahead. Or even in a situation where you have to go to kind of a risky meeting, as long as the meeting's not expected to last more than an hour, you can send your mislead clone in for you. They look like you, they act like you, and unless the other person has true sight or something like that, they're going to have no reason to think that it's not you. And so you can go in, something goes bad, the clone just is gone, and you're in another room far enough away that you don't have to worry about being in danger. So yeah, cool spell list. Second, the thing that you get at the 3rd level when you choose this archetype, is called Cunning Will. You have advantage on saving throws against being charmed or for frightened. Elves naturally are resistance to charms, so adding the frightened condition is nice. And then in addition to that, you get proficiency in one of the following skills: deception, performance, persuasion. They're charisma things. This Fey Wanderer is really built around the idea that they are not just kind of a Fey warrior. They are a guardian in the truest sense. They're a bouncer. They're a guard. They're a little bit of everything. And anyone that's ever had to do bouncing or anything similar to that, where your goal is to either keep people away from somewhere or kind of keep the peace in an area, using physical force is always a last resort. What's significantly more useful is your ability to intimidate, to manipulate, to ensure that people are doing the things you want them to do. So that really kind of fits into this Fey Guardian kind of the thing. And then the third thing, and this was something I mentioned when I originally did the Ranger and the Revised Ranger, is that the defining feature of a Ranger is their Hunter's Mark. It's a spell that only they get, and the Vengeance Paladins. And it's this spell itself is designed to be a Ranger defining thing. I'm not a huge fan of something that defines the class being just a spell that technically anyone can take, since it's a first level spell and you only need one feat magic initiate to get that spell. So I'm a big fan of shifting that thing from a spell to some sort of ability, and this the third level feature does that. Basically, it's called Dreadful Strikes, and basically what it is you gain a bonus action that you can use to imbue your weapon or weapons you're currently holding with magic until the end of your turn. So this is something you'd have to do every turn and use your bonus action for. The weapons are magical, which is actually really useful for the third level characters. In general, you don't get kind of auto magic weapons until 6th level. So that's useful in itself. And they deal an extra 1d6 psychic damage on a hit, and a creature can take this extra damage only once per turn. Now, the wording there is really interesting, because it says a creature can take this extra damage only once per turn, instead of you can only cause this damage once per turn. Which means, basically, if you are attacking multiple creatures, you can hit multiple creatures with it, and be able to get that damage twice as long as you're attacking different creatures. Now, melee rangers are generally suspected to be dual wielding, and your offhand attack uses your bonus action. So that would seem like a limiting feature, but they mention when you engage into two-weapon fighting, you can imbue your weapons as part of the same bonus action you use to make the attack. The only issue I have with that wording is the idea that in order to make the bonus attack, you have to have taken the attack action first. Because in the PHB it specifically says when you take the attack action, you can use your bonus action to attack with an offhand weapon. So if you're two-weapon fighting, if you read this literally and pay very close attention to the wording, it basically would be you can only get magic weapons and that extra damage on your bonus attack, which is only one attack. When you get to 5th level and you have extra attack, that means you're making 2 normal attacks and then 1 magic attack. Now, I think The intention behind it is that if you're using two weapon fighting, you can still use this. Because if you're not using an offhand attack, you can actually take your bonus action at any point during your turn. So without the two weapon fighting, you can go right at the beginning of your turn, bonus action, dreadful strike your weapon, and then have two magic attacks. And like I mentioned earlier, attack two different creatures. So I think that's what they were trying to do with this, is say, well, yeah, if you're two weapon fighting, you can still get your bonus action attack. We don't want to punish people for two weapon fighting because that's a ranger thing. And this would definitely could create something unique about a ranger dual wielding than any other class. So I like it. The wording there, I think, isn't the greatest, but I can't think of a good way to word it to get it the way they intended. So at my table, I would probably rule that you can use dreadful strikes on your standard action attacks, or your just action attacks, instead of just on your bonus action attack. Still cool, a nice way to kind of make that hunter's mark kind of thing a little bit different. And the nice thing about this is you can actually use dreadful strikes and hunter's mark on this as the same target. You'll just have to one turn put the hunter's mark on, and then in the next turn you would be able to use dreadful strikes because they both take a bonus action. 7th level, you get what's called Blessing of the Courts. Once during each of your turns, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend a spell slot to deal extra psychic damage. The extra damage is the 3d6 psychic damage, and the creature must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be frightened of you until the end of your next turn. This is really cool. This is something I should have mentioned before. The fact that you're doing psychic damage, getting resistance to psychic damage specifically is really hard. There's, I think, maybe one or two monsters that are kind of psychic based that might have resistance to psychic damage. And to my knowledge, I don't believe there's any spells that give you resistance to psychic damage. Even things like barbarians with the bear totem, they're not resistant to psychic damage. So psychic damage is a really great way to give them just a type of damage that isn't going to be resisted by anything. Which Hunter's Mark won't give you that. It's just the same damage as your weapon attack. Most other things that give you extra damage will give you radiant or some sort of elemental, which can be resisted. Psychic generally isn't. So going back to Blessings of the Court, this basically gives you a paladin-like smite. You burn a spell slot when you make the hit. It's not when you make the attack. It happens when you make the hit, which is good because you can use this when you crit to not just add the 3d6 psychic, but 66 psychic damage because of the doubling the damage dice. I like this. Again, it adds more to the kind of guardian aspect. The psychic damage is really cool, and this actually makes the ranger a character that can go toe to toe with things like paladins and fighters as far as the damage is concerned. Again, the PHB ranger has issues keeping up with the damage when you could compare them to other weapon-based classes, especially once you start doing things like Eldritch Knights or Paladins or Hexblade Warlocks, where they not only get their attacking, their weapon abilities, they also can add on magic damage. So this really will kind of start leveling that playing field. It works very similar to a Paladin's Divine Smite. The only difference being they can level up the damage by burning higher level spell slots, where this, it's just any spell slot you use, you're going to get this same damage, which I'm not 100% happy with, because again, it just feels like a lesser version of a Paladin Smite, and that's what the Rangers kind of been plagued with, is they have these lesser versions of a bunch of different things. Still really good. The psychic thing, I think, makes up for the fact that you can't level up the damage, and the fact that you generally don't see ranged paladins. They're almost always going to be melee things. So being able to do that at range is another really cool thing. Now, it is also limited to just once during each of your turns, which that I'm not thrilled with. Because you're already limited by forcing you to burn a spell slot, also not allowing you to do it, burn basically multiple slots per turn, I think is a little bit more limiting. Again, especially compared to the Divine Smite of the Paladin, where if they're dual wielding, they can make the 3 attacks if they have the extra attack, and each one can have a smite on it doing crazy damage. They go through their spell slots like nuts. So that's the only aspect I'm not a fan of, is the once during each of your turns, because I think that just limits it a little bit too much. And again, Rangers actually don't have as many uses for their spells as Paladins do, which may be why they put that in there. Paladins have a lot of different things they can use their spells for. Rangers just don't. They have Hunter's Mark, things like I think it's called Quick Quiver, something like that. There's a few like concentration spells they have access to, and then every so often they'll have things like Cure Wounds or that. But for the most part, most of their spell slots are going to their Hunter's Mark or one-shot kind of thing. So having another way to use spell slots is nice. I wish you could use them a little bit more if you needed that burst damage. In addition to that, you also, whenever you make a charisma check, you gain a bonus to the check equal to your wisdom modifier. So again, going back to that kind of manipulation style, play style, now your deception or whatever you took at the beginning of the class, deception, performance, or persuasion, now also gets your wisdom modifier, which you probably should have a decent level for this, simply because of all the fear effects that the class is built on. So this is definitely a character that would want both the dex and wisdom pretty high, very similarly to a monk. 11th level, you get what's called Beguiling Twist. Basically, whenever a creature you can see with 100 to 20 feet of you succeeds on a saving throw against being charmed or frightened, so a very specific thing, you can use your reaction to force a different creature you can see within 120 feet of you to succeed on a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC, or suffer your choice of one of the following effects. They become charmed or frightened by you for a minute, or they take 3d10 psychic damage. Again, this, especially for a ranged ranger, gives you a whole new use for your reaction. If you're a ranged ranger, generally you're not going to be making opportunity attacks, which is the most common use of your reaction. And there's not a ton of other uses you have built into the character for your reaction. So this actually gives you a use for your reaction. It's got 120 feet, which is nice. And again, there's so many other things in this class that allow you to cause people to get charmed or frightened. If that fails, you can just shift it over to another creature and either make them charmed or frightened, which can be very useful, or just do the 3d10 psychic damage. It requires you fighting multiple creatures, but 3d10 psychic damage is nothing to shake a stick at. Again, it's generally not going to be resisted. It's a lot of damage. Your average damage for that is easily going to be around the 18 mark, which is great. And you can do it from range. So again, I like melee rangers. As a melee ranger, you can be doing this, and it just kind of works well with everything else you're doing. But as a ranged ranger, this is a really, really useful way to, again, be able to compete with fighters and paladins and warlocks even, and even some casters as far as single target damage. So I like it. I think it's cool if it fits with the class. And then finally, Misty Presence is the 15th level of a feature. And it's by far, I think, one of the coolest abilities I've seen in the class. Definitely peak hunter rangers and stuff. You gain a bonus action that you can use to force a creature you can see within the 30 feet of you to make a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failed save, the target can't see or hear you for 24 hours. The target gets to repeat the saving throw basically if you do anything to them. If you if you hit them with an attack roll, force it to make a saving throw, or deal damage to it. And on a successful save, it's immune to that feature for 7 days. This is just massively cool. And again, for a ranged ranger, it's a little bit limiting because you have to get within the 30 feet. And if you're using a longbow, 30 feet is really close. Generally, most rangers that are using longbows or even just short bows are staying back 60 or 90 feet as long as they have the room for it. So having to get within the 30 feet isn't horrible. It's just not great for a ranged ranger. For a melee ranger, this is perfect. It's a really cool ability. They are eventually going to beat your DC. So it's not like this is something that's going to last the entire round. But if you're against a low wisdom creature, you can probably easily get 3 or 4 turns of being invisible from them. They can't see you. They can't hear you. There's no way for them to figure out where you are, which will give you advantage on your attack rolls. It will... and then the interesting thing about this isn't invisibility, which can be beaten with things like true sight. It specifically says they can't see or hear you. So this will get around things like true sight. This will get around tremor sense because they can't see or hear you, and tremor sense is vibrations, which is a sound. So literally, you become visible from a creature, and as long as you're not actively attacking it or doing things to it, you can pick off everyone else around them, and they never get a chance to re-roll until you start attacking them. So tactically, this is a really interesting thing, especially if you're facing a big baddie with a bunch of minions. You can use this. It's a bonus action. So again, you have to kind of pick and choose. Do you want a Hunter's Mark? Do you want a Misty Presence? You can decide, hey, I'm going to do this. The big baddie will leave you alone, which also means, again, because rangers can heal with cure wounds, you can actually be the dude that just wanders around keeping people up. If you need to, because you're never going to get targeted by the big baddie unless there's some sort of area that the thing. And with enough other things happening, logically, they're not really going to focus on you when you're, 3 or 4 other friends are trying to kill them. So it's such a cool ability. The last part of it is once you've used this bonus action, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest, or until you spend a spell slot of 4th level or higher to use it again. I like this thing. We see it quite a few times in this document. this idea of you get a free use of an ability as soon as you get it. You get to use it once per day, no matter what. If you want to use it more, you can burn a spell slot. And again, I mentioned before, Rangers don't have a ton of things they're using their spell slots for. Hunter's Mark is the big thing, and then there's a few other things that can be useful in certain situations. I mean, obviously, there's spells of every level that you can use, but most Rangers in general are spending their turn making attacks instead of casting spells. So this gives you another use for your bonus action. So it gives you, again, choices where there isn't a kind of a predefined, this is the right choice, and all these other choices you could make, but they're going to make you do worse. Every single choice you have is a valid choice, and you just have to kind of weigh which one you like better, which again is what I consider good design. And you can now burn for 4th and 5th level spell slots, which you don't have a ton of. Let's be honest. But you can use that to do this again against different targets and stuff like that. So, really interesting. I think it's a really useful but powerful ability for a 15th level ability. I think it fits really well with other ones. And this definitely feels like a ranger ability. You know, the ability, especially a Fey ranger, which is what this is. The ability to basically pick a target and affect them in a way where they can't see you, but you can see them, is like peak ranger hunter stuff. You can stalk this person literally walking right behind them, and they will never know you're there until you attack them or do something to them. It really fits into that idea of this natural explorer / warrior that stalks its prey and has very specific creatures that it's really good at killing. This doesn't give you a creature to type that you're really good at attacking. This lets you just pick, you know what? You're going to be the one that I'm really good at killing right now. So I love this. Again, I don't like the PHB Ranger. I think it's really limited. I think the abilities of the archetypes kind of conflict with the abilities of the base class just in general. And the Beastmaster Ranger is a waste of space. However, the stuff in Xanathar's guide, the new classes in there, and this new class here, I think they figured out what went wrong with the Ranger, and these new subclasses are for fixing that and actually making the Ranger a lot more playable. I'm not saying it's not playable. Again, I have a standard Hunter Ranger from the PHB that I used to play in the Adventures League, and I did really well. I never felt underpowered, but I know this system really well, and I was able to build this character specifically so that it could play well. I think the Ranger is one of those classes that if you're using just the PHB stuff, it's not a beginner class. You have to know this system really well, or you're just going to feel underpowered, kind of like the Druid. So anyway, yeah, these are never getting short, apparently. But like I said, I really like this class. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this class. Again, I tend to prefer the revised Ranger over the PHB one, but due to the fact that it looks like that's never becoming a thing, these new subclasses, I think, fix the Rangers so much better and make it of a viable class. So I really would like to see all the ones I've talked about from this. I think they're good. But the Fey Wanderer is probably the one I would like to see published the most. Because, again, I think the Ranger got the short end of the stick in the 5th edition, and it's such a cool class, and it's such an iconic class from previous editions. I really would, because they basically, on Xanathar's guide, they do have a revised Hunter Ranger, but I don't believe they have a revised Beastmaster Ranger, and I'd love to see them come up with a new archetype for that. Anyway, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye!